Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Happy Friday. Wherever you're at around the world, welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Let me turn this music down a little bit. That's DOS Tapes. Oh, I gotta love them. Before we get started, of course, I want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all the tunes that you hear in the show. Their Bandcamp link is in the description below. Before we get started with today's show, of course, got to pay a couple bills. So just stick around for a hot second, and we're going to get to all of the deliciousness that is today's episode. Of course, this episode will be available on iTunes, Spotify, podcasts, wherever you find them. Check us out, the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Leave us a rate and review. It goes a very, very long way. Truly appreciate it. I want to say thank you to the current Patreon members. You guys are the best. Love you to death. Thank you to the future Patreon members. If you can, please consider clicking the Patreon link below. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support the show, make sure it continues to grow. We are a public access channel, so we are here because of viewers like you, so truly appreciate it. If you can't, don't worry about it, baby. We got you. There's nothing hidden behind a paywall here. All of our content is absolutely 100% free as soon as we make it to you, the people. We do ask you, though, to please like, share, subscribe. That goes a very long way, and ring the bell. That way, anytime we do a live interview or time change on the show, you're notified about it. So, yeah. Of course, thank you to the moderators and everybody in the chat. We have links not only to merch, but our Discord, which will be hanging out in the Discord after the show for at least an hour. The discussion there is always fun, so check out the Discord. Before we get to our guests, let's bring in our co-host, shall we? You guys know this gentleman, Mr. Michael Mataluni. What's up, buddy?
Hello, great to be here, brother.
Always a pleasure.
It's Friday. I got a job. That's not true.
Yeah. We all know that's not true. That's a good thing, though. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. We've got an amazing guest today, and we just bring it on Fridays at UCR. So
yeah. Well, here we are in KGRA-DB. By the way, thanks to Bill, our producer in the back. Appreciate all you have back there, buddy. We love you to death. And what's up to the KGRA-DB family? Welcome. Glad you guys are here. All right, let's bring in our guest co-host for the day, because Rather was feeling under the weather. He couldn't make it today. I was bummed out, but that's okay. We were going to bring this gentleman on either way, but he's a friend of the show. He's been on a few times. If you're not familiar with him, he's my good friend out here in Los Angeles that I've done some acting with, but he's more than just an actor. He's one of my favorite humans on the planet. Jake Matthews, how are you, sir?
How are you, man? Dude, this is so fun. I love this song.
Do you?
This is so fun. Yeah. I was feeling so depressed before this. Now I feel great.
Excellent. That's the whole point of the music, man.
I think I might have caught your episode to get one of your older episodes that you guys did, like before we even met, Lou. So I had a blast there. So I'm sure this is gonna be a blast as well.
Oh yeah, nice to meet you, Michael.
Nice to meet you,
Mikey.
Jay.
You're sounding a little strange. I don't know. I don't know. Check something out. Just make sure you're good. I don't know if it's just maybe a little bit of a lag, but we'll figure it out. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. It's a little low. Huh. Maybe that's my set. I don't know. No, I'm pretty good on headset. But
let me see what I can do. I'll see what I can do.
All right, let's see what's happening. Let's see what you can do. So Jacob, before we get started, before we bring in the professor, I'm curious, because just for the folks out there who haven't met you or watched your episodes when you've been on the show, can you give us a little bit of background, man? What do you do outside of acting?
Oh, outside of acting, I'm a sailor. I got my pilot's license last year during the pandemic. I'm running for Congress right now in Oregon's 4th district in the primaries. So if you live in Oregon, vote for me. And I'm reading about something called terror management theory. I'm reading about Einstein's 5 papers from 1905. And I have a lot of questions for our guests, by the way. So this is an awesome guest that we're having on.
Yeah, I'm excited that you're here.
Yeah.
I knew you would have fun with this conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so without further ado, let us bring in our guest for the day. It is Professor Matt Szydagis, or Szydagis. I don't know. I'm going to get corrected on this here in a second, I'm sure. Matthew Szydagis received his Ph.D. from the University of Chicago. He is now an associate professor at UAlbany studying experimental particle astrophysics. In particular, direct detection of dark matter, or WIMPs, weakly interacting massive particles, and general particle detector development for rare event searches. He grew up watching Star Trek, of course, The Next Generation. I'm interested to know if he knows Avi's views on Star Trek. We'll get into that. And he loves season 1. From that moment forth, he simply fell in love with the character Dave. So he realized he wanted to be a science officer, and that was a position for him. After being inspired by Star Trek, he became a physicist, becoming the one to make time travel and FTL travel a reality, faster than light travel, just in case you guys don't know what that means. But he is also sidetracked along the way to find dark matter. Without further ado, Professor Matthew Szydagis. How are you, sir?
Hi, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Let's get you here in the right square. There we go. So first things first, did I get that? What is the pronunciation of your last name?
It's Szydagis.
Szydagis. Way off.
Yeah, use the
way off.
The SZ is like an SH. It's Polish.
Love it. Well, welcome, Professor. I'm really happy that you're here. I guess for our audience who are not familiar with you, if you could just sort of give us a quick rundown on who Professor Matthew Szydagis is.
Sure. So yeah, I've been a professor at the University at Albany, SUNY, for the past 7 years, and I'm an experimental astroparticle physicist. So my primary focus in my research is the search for dark matter, but I got involved with UAPs thanks to my colleague, who's I think a really huge name and famous in this field, and that's Professor Kevin Knuth, who's written a lot about UFOs and has been very prominent about this for many years. And so he's my friend and colleague at the University of Albany who really got me into this.
Well, I know Michael, and let's bring him back on. Let's see how his mic's working right now. Michael had Kevin Knuth on the show. How are you doing? Let's listen.
How's this mic? Is this mic all right?
Man,
it's bad, huh?
It's pretty tint. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, it's a little tinty.
All right, I'm gonna come back in. I'm gonna come back in on another browser. I'll be back.
All right, cool. All right,
maybe with that number.
You got it. That's first world problems. Sometimes we got to deal with technical issues, so we deal with them on the fly. So thank you guys for being patient out there in the radio world. And so so what are you currently working on right now that you find most interesting? I mean, I know you're working with UAPX, and we'll get to that. But outside of UAPX, what else are you doing?
So my main objective in my research, as I said, search for dark matter. I work on the Lux Zeppelin project, abbreviated LZ, which is a liquid xenon detector that is deployed underground in South Dakota, the site of a former gold mine, because in order to look for dark matter, you need to get away from naturally occurring radiation, like cosmic rays that are all around us. So you have to go deep underground. So even though dark matter is in outer space, we look for it deep underground. And so I'm very excited because we've been working hard for many years to build the LZ dark matter experiment, and it's one of the largest, if I'm not mistaken, the largest dark matter experiment on the world that will be coming online fully shortly, and should have its first data hopefully sometime this year. So that's really besides obviously UAP and UAPX, that's really my sort of day job main focus. Right. Is the search for dark matter with LZ.
Can I ask you this? And this is kind of like, I guess, in relation to the conversation we'll have later, but how easy or how difficult was it to get funding to do this study? And I know this weird question, but funding, like, why are you asking me about funding? But I'm curious because we're trying to figure out ways on how to get funding for entities like UAPX or the Galileo project, trying to convince billionaires, hey, this is a worthy thing to invest in. So I'm curious, like, how long is this study going to go on for? What is the budget for it? And do you think, these are a lot of questions, but do you think we're close to discovering what dark matter is?
That's a great question. So, if funding has been going down year after year for basic science, unfortunately. So getting funding for something like studying UFOs, UAPs, it's not just difficult; it's difficult squared. But to even get basic science that is acknowledged, like the search for dark matter, dark energy, things like that, it is getting increasingly difficult. But I've been profoundly lucky because of my career trajectory. I happened to end up on one of the projects that was selected by the U.S. Department of Energy for funding. So dark matter is one of and continues to be one of the scientific priorities for the United States. That being said, the amount of funding for basic research continues to just get cut and cut and cut by Congress, by both parties. And it does get harder and harder to get students, to get postdocs, to get equipment. So I'm very lucky to have excellent funding from the Department of Energy to be able to look for dark matter with a horizon of the next roughly 3 to 6 years, hopefully a little bit more, to work specifically on LZ. What happens after that? Is there going to be a next generation dark matter detector? That really depends, honestly, on whether there is money for it. But yeah, the Department of Energy has made the search for a dark matter a significant priority. Really good because it does enable it and does make it possible to get funding for students and equipment to be able to move forward. But the amount of funding we spend on dark matter is a fraction of total scientific budget, which in itself is a teeny tiny drop in the water amount of money when you take into account, defense spending and everything else in the whole U.S. budget. If we had the same funding as, for example, the Defense Department, we would have, we would probably have found dark matter 20 years ago. We'd be figuring out what it is already, but we have to kind of just limp along with what we have, which is that is good and a good generous funding, but it is still tiny compared to the amount we spend in other areas. It's all about, what we prioritize in the scientific community, but also as a nation.
Is there a military reason for their funding of this? Like, is there anything that they can use from your research?
No, it's DOE, not DOD.
Right.
Department of Energy.
Right, but how does the Department of Energy decide which projects get funded? Like, is there any sort of military use for what you're studying?
Absolutely none.
Absolutely none. Okay.
Maybe in a few centuries. I mean,
right.
The dark matter right now is like where electricity was in the in the 19th century, or antimatter in the early 20th century. We don't have potentially even the imagination to know if there are any practical applications. It's only basic research,
Gotcha.
And that's part of the problem. Is it does not have motivation other than it's the expanding of the horizons of human knowledge.
Okay.
But what many people don't know is that the DOE, Department of Energy, has an Office of Science that's dedicated to such things. So the Department of Energy is not just about things that make energy, despite its name. It has an office dedicated specifically to things where if you're cynical, you say they're useless, or if you know that everything starts out useless and eventually is practical, then it's basically the Office of Science is dedicated to the expansion of human knowledge with zero practical application.
Can I ask you a quick question? How do I sound? Is it any better?
You sound great now. Yeah,
awesome.
Way better.
Amazing. All right, I'm so sorry about that, guys.
Right.
Please forgive me, Professor, if I missed this. So I wanted to ask, and just so I'm very clear on dark matter versus dark energy, the purpose of dark matter is something that we theoretically posit is the reason that we can't account for the amount of gravity in the universe. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, yes.
Okay, got it. I just wanted to make sure because I always confuse the two. That being said, and kind of can you give me like a deep dive as to what the purpose of the study of dark matter is? Because we have other scientists and I know that you may have already covered some of this, but we have other scientists in other fields. We talked to Avi Loeb the other day, and he's like, why are we focusing on, dark matter when it's purely a theoretical at this point? Is that something that you can answer succinctly?
Absolutely. First of all, purely theoretical. First, I'm going to attack that point because the word theory in science is synonymous with the word fact. That's not how the word theory is used in daily life. So hypothesis is used for something that's unproven. So to call something a theory is usually an insult, except that in science, to call something a theory is to elevate it to like, oh, it's practically a fact.
Right.
And that's a huge problem with how we use, there's a difference between the connotation and denotation of different words. Now, unfortunately, what I just said is not 100% accurate, because then you have string theory, which has zero evidence. So unfortunately, there are a couple things out there that muddy the waters of what I just said. But for the most part, when you say something is a theory, like theory of gravity, atomic theory, evolutionary theory, when we use the word theory in science, we mean fact, as in it has so much overwhelming evidence for it that it's granted the use of the word theory versus the word hypothesis.
Why does string theory deviate from that practicality?
I don't want to get into that because I have friends in string theory. I don't want to speak ill of string theory. I have friends who do string theory, but yeah, string theory is this.
String theory can't be tested, right?
But for the most part, when we use the word theory, it means fact, period. It's got an overwhelming amount of evidence. So for example, we still refer to Einstein's theory of relativity. Even though GPS wouldn't work without it, the GPS on your phone wouldn't work. Satellites have time dilation, so things like that. So now the thing about then why are we looking for dark matter? Because there's a huge amount of indirect evidence for it. I would love to speak with Avi about that because there's a massive amount of indirect evidence. All right, so we have those who say there is no dark matter or we're just chasing something that isn't there. Focus on the evidence from the 1970s and 80s and pretend the additional evidence doesn't exist we've gotten since then. So everyone who says, for example, there's no dark matter, we can just modify our theory of gravity, and then they pull out papers from 1979 and say, look, I can explain the galactic rotation curves. And I go, great. Now, can you please explain gravitational lensing and the cosmic microwave background and large-scale structure and all these other pieces of evidence? So we have, I think, last time I tried to count 7 or 8 independent pieces of evidence that agree with each other, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And that's why dark matter is a good theory. Right. Now, could it still not be there? Absolutely. As a good scientist, I have to admit that I could be spending my time on something that doesn't exist. And that's fine. That's fine because the work I do, like I said, its funding is a tiny fraction of the overall science budget. So it's not like we're wasting billions of dollars. We're spending millions to do something that has a lot of evidence for it, mountains of evidence for it, going back decades. So that's why the search is worthwhile in my scientific opinion.
Right. I should apologize. I may have put words in Avi's mouth. He may have been we may have been on the conversation of string theory and not dark matter. So please don't hold him to that.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, but I'm just speaking in generalities.
Right. I understand.
I have encountered scientists in different fields who have said, not Avi, I'm saying scientists in other fields who say why are we wasting our time on looking for dark matter? And so and that's my answer to that.
Got it. Where is it? Where is the dark matter?
Everywhere. It's inside of you and me right now.
How can we conceptualize that, though? Like, how can we begin to conceptualize what dark matter really means?
We can begin because we have great analogies of existing things such as neutrinos. There are trillions upon neutrinos going through your body from the sun that don't interact very often, just like dark matter. So we have an analogy of something that already exists that we've studied, that we discovered decades ago that we've been studying. So the neutrino particle is a great analogy because of how rarely it interacts.
What do you foresee being the technological advances for making the discovery of dark matter?
So that's a great question, but that ties into what I said earlier. Yeah. We have no idea. It has no practical applications. We don't have even perhaps the necessary imagination to know what it could do. So a good example of that is there is a story, I don't know if it's apocryphal or real or not, where allegedly the King of England visited Michael Faraday, who was working on electricity. King asked him, what is this electricity? It's worthless. And Michael Faraday said, I don't know what it's good for, Your Majesty, but I do know you'll be taxing it one day. That's the answer I always give. And an even better potential example of that, that's maybe closer to home, more closely related, even is antimatter. So when antimatter was discovered in the 1930s, I believe, what good is that? Who cares, right? And yet nowadays we inject people with very safe small quantities of antimatter to diagnose cancer in PET scans. And so the same thing can happen with dark matter. That's decades or centuries from now. There are applications we can't even dream of. So when I've talked about the dark matter in the past, I've thrown out there the potential idea for using dark matter as like spacecraft propulsion, but that's really speculative because we wouldn't even know how to gather it since it interacts so rarely. So what would you do with it? If it doesn't interact, you wouldn't have any chemical reaction from it. So it was just a wild idea I've thrown out there, but that's the best that I've been able to come up with myself.
We like to speculate over here on the Unidentified Celebrity Review, so you're
Yeah.
more welcome to do so. I have a quick question about dark matter versus antimatter. Can you tell me how I can conceptualize the difference? What is antimatter?
Completely unrelated. So antimatter is just, as I said, the major difference is that unlike dark matter, we discovered antimatter 80 years ago or something like that, 90 years ago. So it's not hypothetical, even theoretical would be the wrong word to use, since we make it every day and use it every day, like I said, in PET scans, for example. So antimatter is just identical to matter in mass, but opposite electric charge. So for example, for electron, you have the anti-electron. For the proton, you have an anti-proton. However, huge numbers of misconceptions about antimatter. Number one is, as I said, is that it has been hypothetical. You should see the amount of people whose minds I've blown when I'm like, but we discovered antimatter in the 1930s. And like, what? I thought it's science fiction. We discovered antimatter in the 1930s in cosmic rays, and we make antimatter every day, and we use antimatter every day in very small amounts. But the special property of antimatter, it's not just, it's the same particle, opposite electric charge. Now, the thing is, when you bring a particle of matter and antimatter together, they annihilate and turn into gamma rays. You get energy. So antimatter is the most efficient way. Bringing matter and antimatter together would be more efficient. If we could utilize that, would be more efficient than nuclear fission or even nuclear fusion at converting matter into energy. Now, what is dark matter? Dark matter, we think, is something like regular matter. And in fact, there's probably anti-dark matter. It's just like there's matter, dark matter, there's dark antimatter or anti-dark matter. I don't know which way to put it. So dark matter is just regular matter that interacts either only gravitationally or primarily gravitationally. And we have no idea what it is. We have some idea as well of particles, but of what they could be. But antimatter, like I said, is rock solid. We've been using it for 90 years, and it's just the same as matter, except same mass, opposite electrical charge. And the other property of antimatter is that it annihilates with matter when you bring it together. So I hope that helps address so they're really not related, except for, like I said, you could have anti-dark matter, because antimatter and dark matter, they're separate categories of distinction.
Jacob, just so I'm going to throw it to you in a second, but just so everyone in the audience knows who's in the chat, I'm saving your questions. So the really good ones we're marking, and we'll ask Professor Szydagis at the end of the conversation. So please keep asking questions. And Jake, did you have a question?
No, not yet.
Oh, okay. I thought you were jumping in with something. So, okay. So then let me ask this, Professor. Do you think, I know you can't really answer the technological sort of advances that we may discover, but do you think that the discovery of dark matter will have a positive or negative effect on humanity overall?
If it would have a negative effect, why am I doing it?
I just the sheer curiosity of it. I don't know. I have no idea. I mean,
you make an argument against the atomic bomb, right?
Yeah, we know so little about it so far.
Yeah, except that then we also have peaceful applications like nuclear power. There is no such thing as something that's binary, negative or positive. Every scientific advance can be used for good or for ill. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it.
Right.
Because first of all, Your question is very broad. Remember that humanity is not just one global government. If we don't find dark matter, then Europe will, or China, or one of the competing experiments to my LZ experiment. So there is no not doing something, because if this country doesn't do it, another one will. There's no not finding something. So knowledge always advances whether we like it or not. And also, the most important thing is that, as I said, everything has positive and negative. But as I said earlier, since I don't know what it could be used for anyway, I can't really answer that, because I don't, at the very least, it has the positive impact of advancing human knowledge, of explaining 25% of the universe that seems to be missing in our understanding in the pie chart of what the universe is made out of. So since I couldn't think of any applications except for my really speculative, spacecraft propulsion one, I can't think of a negative at all. It interacts so rarely as it is that it's hard to think of even a positive application.
Okay, fair.
Can you connect the dots for us? Like what, in your speculation, like what about dark matter gives you, like allows you to have fun with speculating that it could be used as a sort of propulsion device? Or
Simply by the fact that it's everywhere. So if you could somehow convert it into a fuel or propellant, and that's the speculation part, is no idea how to do that since it interacts so rarely. But if you could, the only reason, to connect the dot there, the only reason I thought of that application is because it's so plentiful. And one of the problems with space travel is the only way we right now as humanity know how to do it is to take your fuel with you and then throw it out the back.
right.
And so that's highly inefficient.
Oh, so you're almost speculating, and this is a very rudimentary example, but remember like bumper cars when you had that little thing that touched like the top, so that you didn't have like a road, like you were constantly connected to your energy source? Is that kind of the
Yeah,
idea?
exactly. If dark matter is so plentiful, it's everywhere, so here's your free resource if you had a way of doing it, since it's everywhere. And there could be higher and lower density areas, but it's so plentiful that if it had some sort of application, fuel might be a good one because it's there and it's everywhere.
Neil deGrasse Tyson had mentioned that it's kind of dangerous calling it matter or dark energy. He said you might as well call it Fred and Wilma. Is that an accurate perception he has, or do we have enough evidence now to call it matter?
No, that's a good point, because these names are just labels for our ignorance. So it's true that use of the word matter in dark matter, we do need to interpret that extremely loosely, because is it particles, waves, both? Is it, what does it actually constitute? That is accurate. These are labels for our ignorance. So calling something matter versus calling something energy, those are just temporary labels for our ignorance until we can discover and figure out what they're made of. So yeah, it is. You don't want to read too much into those labels of matter and energy and try to connect it with our ordinary concepts of matter and energy.
But antimatter would be correct? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And we're studying this because there's gravity that should be in our universe that seems to be missing, you said?
Well, it's matter that seems to be missing. Or
matter that seems to be, okay.
Because we see the gravitational effect, but we don't see the matter that should be creating that gravity.
Okay.
Missing matter, yeah. It's the
as long as you don't try to tax this, Professor, I'm good.
Oh, it'll get taxed. Don't you worry. It'll get taxed. No, but that's interesting that you say. Well, I was just going to say that's interesting that you say it's a label that we put on it because of our ignorance. So my other question was, we've discovered antimatter, as you said, and we have applications for antimatter. So would antimatter, does that make sense as matter?
Yes,
it does.
Because it's just matter.
Okay, with an opposite electrical charge. Like how do I conceptualize that? Like, this cup is matter. It has mass. Mm-hmm. Could I have an antimatter cup? Like, I don't understand why it's related.
It's exactly the same thing. If the entire universe was made of antimatter, we would call antimatter matter, and call matter antimatter.
Okay.
It's just an accident, and we don't understand how this came to be. It's an accident of our cosmological history in this universe that we're mostly one thing and not the other. It's a mystery why it wasn't equal. So so I think I know where you're going with that. There's actually a recent experiment that shows that actually antimatter falls down. In case you were wondering, it does not fall up. It is not anti-gravity. It's not the same thing at all.
Right.
So antimatter falls down. It has mass. It just has opposite electric charge. So an anti-atom looks just like an ordinary atom and would behave chemically the same. The difference is the electricity would flow the other way because you have positively charged electrons, negatively charged protons, but it really wouldn't have a significant difference. There are some subtleties of how some nuclear forces, there's some really deep exceptions of how antimatter and matter don't behave identically, but we don't fully understand them yet.
Got it. But in this universe, we have matter, and antimatter is simply the opposite electrical charge. So it wouldn't really make it's not that different. It just doesn't manifest itself in this universe. We have to come up with unique ways to manifest it with.
Oh no, it is naturally occurring, but just at a very small amount. I mean,
right.
That's how antimatter was discovered in cosmic rays in the 1930s. So it's naturally occurring. We just don't understand why is it unequal. Why didn't the universe have exactly 50-50? Why is antimatter so rare? Like, why don't we have antimatter stars and planets? We're not sure why, but something happened early on in the universe where matter started to dominate over antimatter because of some subtle differences in nuclear reaction rates that we don't understand.
Got it. I think I'm getting it.
Dr.
There's a difference with antimatter and matter. So in your example of your cup if you bring matter and antimatter together, disappears and turns into energy. If you just had a tiny amount, and I think this was the premise of I have not read the book or seen the movie, so I hope I don't make a mistake, but Angels and Demons, I believe the premise was there was an antimatter bomb. It is true that if you could manufacture enough antimatter, you can't, and we're not even close to having that capability, like not even close. If you brought a tiny amount of antimatter together with matter, you could just level a city much more effectively than an atomic bomb. Way more effectively than even a hydrogen bomb, because conversion of when antimatter meets matter, disappears and turns into gamma rays. So when I mentioned earlier, we use small amounts of antimatter safely in medical science. You're actually, in PET scans, you're injected with a beta emitter, beta plus emitter, so it emits positive electrons that finds negative electrons in your body, annihilates, turns into gamma rays, which are then traced to find, well, where did those gamma rays come from in your body? And that's how they find locations of cancerous tumors where they are more likely to absorb a sugar. So you're injected with a sugar where some of the atoms are replaced with regular atoms still, but that create antimatter naturally. So one of the ways antimatter is created naturally is there are some unstable atoms that produce anti-electrons, also known as positrons, just naturally occurring. It's just one anti-electron per atom. So it's a very, very, very small safe amount. It's like not even close to what you need to do any sort of damage to
city leveling, as it were.
Yes, you need a lot of antimatter to do that, like in the premise of Angels and Demons. Yeah.
Dr. Katie Mack had mentioned that there's something called a gravitational leak that can occur between brains, which I think means beyond, if there's like a multiverse. Is that correct, what I'm talking about here? It's actually been a while since I read the book.
Yes, but that's unrelated to antimatter or dark matter.
So that can't be that there's a gravitational leak without matter. Like you can't have gravity without matter, basically.
That's right. That's right. So by definition, the gravity is created by matter. Now, in the example you just gave, it is possible. One of the possible explanations, this is the Randall-Sundrum model, is that dark matter is ordinary matter, but it's trapped in an extra dimension or higher dimension. That's why we can't see it. So that is a viable explanation for dark matter. It's just regular matter, but it's in another direction that we can't see. That's not the same thing as a multiverse, though. So there's a very common misconception in fiction that conflates two things: parallel universes and extra dimensions.
Right?
They are synonymous in science fiction.
Okay.
Actually, they are distinct concepts in real science. So an extra dimension is just another direction in which to move that we can't perceive, because we perceive three spatial dimensions. Whereas a parallel universe is a whole nother there's a universe where I'm sitting and I'm wearing a different color shirt having this interview, and there's a copy of me. So that's,
or you're a reptile,
right? So that's a separate concept from extra dimensions, and they're often conflated all the time. I see them conflated, unfortunately, all the time.
But if she's talking about a gravitational leak between brains, does the matter have to go with it?
She's talking about both. She's talking about possibility of extra dimensions. So that's where the conflation is actually on purpose, because actually she's talking about possibility both of extra dimensions, but also the possibility there are other universes with separate sets of dimensions. Okay. So both of those ideas can be true. It can get very complicated very fast. So she's talking about gravitational leak in our universe, potentially, of matter that's in an extra dimension. Now, I could be mistaken. Maybe she's also talking about gravity from matter in other universes, but I don't think that's the case, because I think if you have separate universes, then they can't communicate. So yeah, there's a lot of crazy possibilities out there.
She had imagined it as like two hands, and there's a gravitational leak between the brains. And yeah. I didn't quite.
My understanding of if what you're talking about is the Randall-Sundrum model, then my understanding is that imagine we all live in flatland, okay? And so we have no words in our language for up and down. We all live in flatland, and the concept of up and down is completely beyond our brains forever. But it turns out that there is a world beyond flatland, and there is an up and down. And so one potential explanation for dark matter is indeed, as you did with your hands, is that we're living here in flatland, but the universe has one or more other directions that exist, other dimensions. And in those other dimensions, you have stars and planets and ordinary matter. And the gravity from that is leaking into our dimension, because gravity is the geometry of space-time. That's what we've learned from Einstein's theory of general relativity. Gravity is the geometry of space-time. So if there are other dimensions of space-time, gravity probably leaks through all of them. And that helps explain the mystery also of why is gravity so weak. Gravity is the weakest force in nature, and we don't understand why. It doesn't seem to be weak, right? We have the Earth, the Sun, the Moon, but they're huge, right? They're huge. They have huge masses. The demonstration I always do for my students, and I got this from Professor Leon Letterman, the late Leon Letterman, famous particle physicist, is a magnet. Take a magnet and a paperclip. Why is that magnet capable of winning against the entire planet Earth? It's kind of strange, right? The electromagnetic force is way stronger than gravity. All forces of nature are way stronger than gravity. Gravity is incredibly weak, and we don't understand why. And one potential explanation is, gravity only looks weak because we're stuck here in flatland, so we only see part of gravity. But gravity is across multiple dimensions that we can't see. So it's an illusion that it's weak. And so that's one of the possible ways of explaining this mystery of why is gravity so much weaker than the electromagnetic force, and then the strong and even the weak nuclear forces.
So go ahead.
No, please.
I was just going to say, so searching for dark matter could in effect be searching for additional dimensions or planes of reality that we've yet to interact with.
Absolutely. And there's two ways to do that. There's the Randall-Sundrum model I mentioned, but there's another thing, which is that if there are extra dimensions, there's a side effect, a potential side effect of their existence, where you have additional particles, kind of like antimatter. You have copies of existing matter particles. And this is known as the Kaluza-Klein tower. And so if there are extra dimensions, one example of this is the Kaluza-Klein theory, is then you have copies of particles. One of those extra particles, that could be dark matter. And then you kill two birds with one stone, is you've got extra dimensions, and that helps explain dark matter.
Could how weak gravity is explain why... Could how weak gravity is explain why quantum mechanics, or why we can't marry quantum mechanics and relativity beyond a Planck length? Because of that.
That's a great question. Yeah, that's part of the mystery, because we're trying to, in the standard model of particle physics, unify the forces and try to simplify and show that as you increase energy, that all the fundamental forces become one. But gravity is the like bastard child or something that doesn't fit. And it just doesn't fit with the other three forces that we've explained so well in particle physics. So we have this excellent explanation of gravity, but gravity is completely separate from the other forces, and we don't understand. Our language is even different. Our mathematical language we use to describe gravity, because it's so different, weaker, but also different in other ways than the other three forces. We don't even use the same mathematics to describe the other three forces that we understand so well in the standard model of physics versus gravity. So that's a great question. Yeah, it's a deep question.
Okay, so there's, first of all, Kevin Knuth says hello, and that he's tuning in from South Africa.
Awesome.
So hello,
What's up,
Kevin.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. And then the second thing is we had a really funny question from Jeremy McGowan, and it's a really good question. If antimatter annihilates matter when they combine, how do you hold antimatter in a container made of matter?
Electromagnetic force.
Boom.
Boom, just drop. There you go, Jeremy.
They had it right on Star Trek, actually, when Scotty's walking around with antimatter in a magnetic bottle. That's actually not that crazy. That's actually quite reasonable. You use electrical repulsion or magnetic repulsion, because remember, antimatter, it's electrically charged, is opposite of ordinary matter. So you can manipulate it with electric and magnetic fields, and have tiny quantities around.
McGowan's got a ton of good questions today. This is a really good one right here. Would the proof of dark matter require modification to the periodic table of the elements to accommodate new elements that could be composed of dark matter?
Probably not. And the reason why is since dark matter interacts so rarely, it does not form atoms and molecules and compounds. I mean, we could be wrong. If we're wrong, then that's very exciting, because then, yes, we would need a whole nother periodic table. But to our best educated guesses, based on our existing look at the astronomical and cosmological evidence of dark matter, is that it interacts too rarely, too weakly, in order to self-interact sufficiently. Now, we could be wrong with that. There is a model, in fact, called SIBM, self-interacting dark matter. So maybe dark matter does have self-interactions, but to the best of our knowledge, probably not. I mean, that being said, we might need a periodic table of dark matter particles, just like we have in the standard model of particle physics. We have the contemporary particle physics periodic table, which explains where the chemical one comes from, where we have, quarks and leptons and Higgs boson. Who's to say there isn't an entire table like that for dark matter? There's dark matter particle type number 1, number 2, number 3. So that kind of in-between answer to your question is probably the most likely scenario, in my opinion. I think we tend to oversimplify. We think dark matter is one thing. Maybe it's a whole bunch of things, just like ordinary matter is. It's just, as I said earlier, it's a label for our ignorance. And it could be that dark matter is both WIMPs and axions and something else and some other dark matter particle that we don't even have a name for yet. And we'll need a whole table for it.
Do you think these leaks that we were talking about earlier, to me, it sounded like a wonderful explanation to what UAP and UFOs could possibly be? It just this complete misunderstanding, because we're on this 4D dimension and this thing is popping through or leaking through, and it manifests itself as either some type of tech or orb or whatever. I mean, is that thought process ever crossed your mind?
It absolutely has. And in fact, it has because of reading Flatland, A Romance in Many Dimensions, the original book. So imagine again, we live in Flatland and Lord Sphere decides to visit Mr. Square. How would Lord Sphere appear to Mr. Square? He would appear as a circle that magically, mysteriously grows and shrinks and has the ability to disappear. But what's actually happening is nothing magical or mysterious. It's a sphere. And the cross-section of a sphere is a circle. But to the Flatlanders, it's miraculous and mysterious. So I think that a lot of things that appear unnatural or abnormal or even paranormal, dare I use, that word, is just normal that has not been explained yet by the scientists living in that plane or brain or dimension.
Sounds like this excites you. Yeah, go ahead.
Is this sort of what Roger Penrose was talking about with the angels and demons, Escher's drawing and how it goes like into like the infinity? He mentions that Escher has a drawing about angels and demons, but they are existing on a 2D dimension. So within the drawing, they think that is the whole universe, but we can view them from the top and see that there's a finite ending.
Yes, so we might think this is our universe, flatland, but in reality, there's up and down, which we don't have words for that fourth, fifth, sixth extra spatial dimension. We don't even have words for them in our language for those extra directions in which to move. And so, yeah, the universe we perceive could be a very small part of the great whole. I mean, we already have that with dark matter and dark energy, where we think that only 4.9% of the universe is the matter that makes up you and me, ordinary matter. So there's 95% of the universe we don't understand. So we already are in that position where there's this vast amount that we don't understand. And that's just the known unknown, right? Like the classic, I think, was Donald Rumsfeld, right? Then there are the unknown unknowns. We already have known unknowns, and then there's the next level of unknown.
How will James Webb help us understand dark matter more, if at all?
That's a great question. So we are going to understand, hopefully, a great many things with James Webb. And one of the things is that it's much better than the Hubble Space Telescope, right? More advanced, newer. And so we're going to be able to see farther. And since the speed of light isn't infinite, astronomy is time travel. The further out you see, the further back in time you see. And so the further we see out, we can see further back in time, which allows us to study the evolution of galaxies and how the universe comes together. And that tells us how much dark matter and dark energy there is by looking at how do stars and galaxies form over billions of years. And we use our telescopes as time machines. We look back in time to see the formation of the early universe. So the James Webb Space Telescope is not only about seeing far, it's also about time travel. We're seeing back in time further and further with the better telescopes we build. So right now, if you're looking at your computer screen, that's not your computer screen. That's your computer screen a fraction of a second ago because light had to bounce off into your eye. We cannot access the present. Right? We talk about past, present, present doesn't exist. We have to wait for light to bounce off of things and enter our eyes. So look at the moon tonight. If it's out tonight, that's not the moon. That was the moon 1.3 seconds ago. Right? Look at the sun. That's not the sun. That's not the sun now, whatever now means. That's also an ill-defined concept. That's the sun 8 minutes ago or 8.3 minutes ago. So in astronomy, when we look at a galaxy a billion light years away, it's also a billion years ago. And that's how in astronomy, how astronomers, I'm not an astronomer, I'm more of a particle physicist, but I hope I can trying to give you an informed opinion on a different field of science, is that as you go back, as you look further back, you see further back in time. And that's what allows us to reconstruct the history of the universe, even though we weren't there.
What does that look like practically with the instruments on the James Webb? Like, what are we looking for when it comes to dark matter? Like, we see back in time, we see like the infrared with James Webb, but what are we looking for to help us further the understanding of dark matter?
Structure. So you can't see dark matter directly.
Right.
So all we're doing is studying the structure of visible matter.
Okay.
Because remember, dark matter, because of its gravity, drives the structure of visible matter.
Okay.
And so the telescopes like James Webb look at dark matter indirectly. It's complementary. It's a complementary approach to what I do, which is build a particle detector. That's a very different approach of looking for dark matter. But we need all these different approaches because, if we discover dark matter, no one's going to believe it, not even the scientific community, because we need to double check it, triple check it by studying it from different perspectives. So the James Webb Space Telescope gives us a completely different approach, like Hubble did, which is just looking at the large-scale structure of the universe developing over time.
I love your passion for this. I just have to remark on that. I really, talking to you has been amazing. We had a question from our audience. Francois Schnell asked, "Hi, to explain observed dynamics, what to think of negative mass or alternative quantized inertia. Isn't the big Repler structure suggests positive and negative force?
So yeah, thank you for your question, Francois. So yeah, the idea of negative mass, first I should explain that for all the viewers because it's often mixed up with antimatter, and that's not what Francois is talking about. I saw the papers he's citing. This is completely separate from antimatter, which falls down, as I said earlier. This is the idea that unlike antimatter and unlike dark matter, there's another thing, and that's you can call it exotic matter, I think is the term that Kip Thorne uses and others. What about matter that has a repulsive gravitational force? Why this is so exciting is because if something like that exists, we don't know if it does. We don't have many theories or models. Francois cited some, but we don't have many hypotheses that say that should even exist. But if there's something called exotic matter, exotic material that has negative mass, then it might have an anti-gravity-like effect. Now, potentially, that could explain dark matter and or dark energy. It potentially could tie all of this together. Right now, that's just a seed of an idea, and it hasn't really found a lot of traction. That doesn't mean it's wrong, right? That doesn't mean it's wrong. When Einstein came up with relativity, lots of people thought it was garbage, right? In Germany, it was said, oh, that's Jewish physics. And then in Britain, Einstein was insulted. It's like, oh, that's German physics. We don't believe that. So of course, it could turn out to be correct. I have seen serious scientific publications suggesting the possibility of the existence of negative mass material. Now, it's really hard, though, to wrap our minds around what that means. It's not just as simple as, oh, it would repel, just like with
a magnet,
electricity.
Right.
It's a little more complicated than that because positive gravity only attracts. So if you have something that has negative mass, it's really bizarre. Something with negative mass would repel other things with negative mass or positive mass, but positive mass would attract negative mass. So it gets really weird really fast, and you get some really weird dynamics that are possible. Now, I'm personally very excited about the possibility of negative mass material existing. I would love for that to be the case, because negative mass material is something you need both for time travel to the past and potentially warp drive, fast and light travel. So I would love it if negative mass existed, and that's even more exciting if that explained dark matter and or dark energy. I think that would be very elegant, but we just don't have enough evidence right now to say whether that's even a viable approach, either mathematically or physically. But I am watching with interest those theoretical physicists working on that. Even though that's not my field, I am supportive of explorations of those crazy ideas like that negative mass material.
Would that be the ultimate weight loss drug?
That'd be really bad.
I'd take it. I would take it in a heartbeat. Baby Goat asks, could gravity one day turn out to be like a centrifugal force? Just an effect that we mistakenly identify as a force?
That already happened. That happened in 1916. We still call gravity a force because, force of habit, see what I did there? So if Einstein's theory of general relativity is the final word, it's not, because we haven't married it with quantum. There's still so much we don't know. But in the context of general relativity, that was Einstein's whole point, is that stop thinking of gravity as a force. All it is curved space-time. Like the cover of every general relativity textbook I've seen is like a warped, rubber sheet and a ball sitting in it. And the point of that rubber sheet analogy is to say gravity's not a force. It's just an illusion caused by the warping of space-time.
It's an effect,
that's not necessarily the final answer. We could come back to gravity being a force, because what if it turns out it is a force and it's carried by a particle? So that could still be possible. But in that case, we don't know how to reconcile that with the view from relativity, where gravity is not a force, but rather is just the warping of space-time. So if you believe general relativity, then that's already happened. It happened already over 100 years ago, is dispelling the thought of gravity as a force. So if gravity is warping of space-time, then force is the wrong word to use for it.
So why do we still continue to use the word force?
Because it could end up being a force, because we want so badly to marry gravity to the three forces in the standard model, the two nuclear forces, electromagnetism. So in the standard model of particle physics, the idea is that gravity is a force and it's carried by a particle called the graviton. Never discovered. Gravitational waves, that doesn't count. That's not a particle. So basically, we don't know. Maybe gravity will turn out to still be a force. And so, yeah, we still use that term. Another reason we still use that term is because Newtonian gravity, the math behind treating gravity as this one over r squared force, it works so well in our daily lives. It's good enough, to get us to the moon. You don't need Einstein's theory of relativity to get to the moon because Newtonian gravity is good enough. So we still use the word force because of how well it works in our everyday lives. It's only when you get to the extreme examples, black holes or the universe as a whole, that the Newtonian concept of gravity as a force begins to fail, and you really need to engage with Einstein's theory of general relativity.
I have a question that I've always wanted to ask a physicist. That description of the bending of space-time around an object, that's in all directions, isn't it? Like, isn't it also this way and this way and this way and just
Correct.
like in all? Okay.
Absolutely. It's the flatland analogy again. No, you hit the nail on the head. It's because our
Right, they only show it in one way.
Dimensions. Okay.
Because we can't visualize it, right? Is that
can't
what you're saying?
visualize.
Right. It's impossible because
So these rubber sheet analogy, the reason why it exists is because our brains cannot picture the three dimensions warping or curving. Can't do it. Our mathematics can do it, but our human brains can't. I should emphasize, by the way, you don't even need an extra dimension for that to be possible. That's what's even weirder, okay? Is basically our three dimensions of space-time. Mathematically, they could be curved without having to be curved in a higher dimension.
right.
So you don't even need extra dimensions, but somehow there could be curvature that is completely beyond our human conception that we can.
Right. What do you make of this idea that physics, our experimental physics, often fails because it's so reliant as an extension of our own senses? So all of our experimentations are formulated out of how we see, how we hear, how we perceive the reality around us.
No, I'm going to be controversial here, actually. No, I disagree with that. I think that was true centuries ago, but that's getting less and less true because we're extending our sensors. So, for example, I can't see infrared, but the FLIR camera can. I can't see gravitational waves. Can you see gravitational waves? They're going through us all the time, and yet our equipment can. So, and I'm not sure what you mean by failure of experimental physics. Aren't you?
I just mean, so we're looking at different wavelengths because we see with eyes. So we understand that our visual abilities come from our ability to see wavelengths. So we build our experiments and our technology around those. So we're trying to see more of what we can't see, but it all stemmed from our original sense of sight that we begin to search beyond our.
I would have agreed with you a century ago, but that's no longer the case. Because what about gravitational waves? What about LIGO? That's not even a form of electromagnetic radiation. So with our technology, we're extending our senses beyond just, different wavelengths of sight. We are doing things, or let's say infrasound, ultrasound, looking at things that are beyond human sound range experience. We're extending our senses with our technology.
But that's my point. That's what I'm asking. So we're extending our senses with our technology. So those technologies are inherently biased because they're extending our senses.
With the exception of gravitational waves, that's not an extension. That's a completely new sense that didn't exist before. So there I disagree. So you could make that case, which you just said, extension for infrared, ultraviolet. It's same old, right? It's light, but it's beyond the spectrum we see.
Right.
That's not the case anymore with gravitational waves or neutrinos. Or I can give you countless other examples where we've created new senses with our technology that didn't exist before, that have nothing to do with eyesight, not even close. Now, is our experimental structure biased? Absolutely. That's why I would love to meet an alien civilization that has different senses and design things differently. Absolutely. Right. Do we have experimental bias because of the way we evolved? Absolutely. But I do have to take issue with the first thing you said about failures of experimental physics. Aren't you on a computer right now? If experimental physics didn't work and quantum mechanics and relativity, then you should throw your phone away in your computer, because clearly we do understand some part of reality enough to build phones and computers. There's plenty we don't understand. But the part that we do, so in fact, the standard model of particle physics is the most successful, as well as general theory of relativity, are the most successful ideas that humanity has ever come up with, have been tested so many times, and we're trying so hard to find a test where they fail, and we can't. But maybe part of that is, like you said, is part of it is the bias of how our brain evolved.
Right. And I guess, and to be fair, like I think I misspoke when I said failure. So all of these experiments have driven us. My only question was, how biased are our technologies that drive us into our understanding of quantum physics? And
we don't know. That's a very meta question, right? Because we would have to step out of ourselves to know that.
Right.
So that's why I said it would be great to someday talk to a non-human sentient intelligence and see how they approached science, right? The thing is, we can't answer your question because we have only one data point. We have human civilization, right? And so we don't know how the way our brains evolved, how does that make us biased? So it's a very meta question. Is basically, you know, how does the way our brain evolved, does that shut us off to certain possibilities automatically? We have no way of knowing that.
Right. Speaking of extraterrestrials, though, I love your Flatland is amazing, by the way. That was something that really opened my mind up in college. But that was the way you speak about it, and your passion for it is really inspiring, because you talk about how we can assume certain things about reality based on the senses or the dimensions that we exist on. And in addition, you know, senses also come down that route as well. What do you make of, you know, obviously I think everybody in this room and everybody in the chat would love to talk to an extraterrestrial, would love to believe that we're being visited, and maybe we are. My question to you is, to what extent do you take that flatland analogy when looking at UAP and UFO? How do you begin to, you know, where do you begin to place that in your personal contextual overlay of reality?
So there are a lot of potential explanations for potential sources, let's say, of non-human intelligence, right? They don't have to be extraterrestrial, it could be extra dimensions, things like that. So I think of the flatland extra dimension analogy actually secondarily. Primarily where I go is the field of exoplanets. I don't even need to appeal to extra dimensions in order to establish the plausibility of the existence of non-human intelligence. I don't even need to go that far, because there's a far Occam's razor easier explanation for a potential source of non-human intelligences, which is the fact that there are probably trillions of planets out there in our dimension, in our universe. And my colleague, Professor Kevin Knuth, who earlier said hi, he's on sabbatical in South Africa, and he said hi earlier, that's his field of research. And so I've learned from him, from my friend and colleague Kevin, there are probably trillions, not billions, trillions of planets in our galaxy alone. Then multiply that by the hundreds of billions of galaxies in the visible universe alone. Then that doesn't count exomoons, okay? Moons around planets outside. So we've discovered something like 8,000 planets outside our solar system, okay? Extrasolar planets. That's in a tiny sliver of the sky, primarily using the Kepler spacecraft. James Webb will help even more. It's one of its many missions. We talked about another mission earlier. Exoplanets is another great one. Tiny sliver of the sky, we found a few thousand, okay? If you extrapolate that statistically, because we know nothing special about that random part of the sky, we can assume there are trillions of planets in the Milky Way galaxy, okay? Milky Way alone. And approximately something like, I've learned from my colleague Kevin, something like 20% of them probably have planets in their habitable zone. Think about what that means. Go look at the sky tonight, pick out 5 stars. One of those stars probably has a planet with the potential for water and oxygen for life. Potential, I have to emphasize, because we haven't measured the atmospheres. But come on, look at the statistics. Like, to me, if someone says we're alone,
Oh, it's
I
bonkers.
say, prove it to me. So you know the whole extraordinary claims, extraordinary evidence thing, mantra, and blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry, but to me, the claim we are alone, that's extraordinary. Prove it to me. Prove it to me. Prove we're alone in a galaxy of trillions of planets. Really? Prove it to me. You can't, because we're not alone. It is not statistically possible. It's ridiculous. At the very least, if they're not an intelligent life, I assure you we're going to find plants and animals and microbes for sure. I mean, give me a break. There are trillions of planets out there. And I don't buy the explanation that if there is intelligent life, they're too far away to visit us. Suddenly, every single physicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, when they're on YouTube, suddenly get hit by the, like, I don't know, a forgetful beam. Did they forget Einstein's theory of special relativity and forget time dilation? Hello? If you travel close enough to the speed of light, you can traverse the galaxy in a few weeks or months. And my colleague, Professor Knuth, has shown this repeatedly. And this is freshman physics. I teach special relativity freshmen. Why does every famous TV physicist who says aliens can't possibly be here, why do they conveniently forget relativity all of a sudden when they're being interviewed? Oh, the distances are too far. Really? Really? They are? Not if you use Einstein's length contraction, which is an experimental fact for decades, or you use time dilation. Suddenly the galaxy is not such a big place. So I don't even need to resort to extra dimensions or multiverse. There is a far easier way to explain what a potential source of non-human intelligence is. There are planets all around us. Almost every star has a planet. More than one. And in fact, it drives me nuts that we still argue about Pluto. Who gives a damn about Pluto? There are thousands of other planets. We still teach our children in school to memorize Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. Who cares about Mercury and Venus? There are 8,000 planets that have been discovered, and we don't even bother teaching our children. So children grow up thinking there are only 8 or 9 planets when there are 8,000 that we've already discovered. And it's a serious problem with science education in this country, that people keep growing up thinking that our solar system is special still, or Earth. It's not. That's been disproven already, over and over again.
Professor, could you speak more on traversing the galaxy in a few weeks?
Sure.
If the Milky Way is 100,000 light years across, how can we traverse it in a few weeks using time dilation?
Time dilation. Time dilation. So if I travel near the speed of light, I can cross the galaxy in a few weeks or months. 100,000 years will have elapsed so my friends and family are all dead back home, and culture and society has changed. But my colleague, Professor Kevin Knuth, points out, who cares? You could have a culture of space-time nomads. And then the argument is, oh, who would do that? Who would be a nomad? We have an example of that. The Polynesian Pacific Islanders, okay? We have human examples of that already. Why can't we have space-time nomads who say, bye home, I'll never see you again, and travel at relativistic speeds to explore? I think it's completely plausible, and my colleague Kevin has plenty of talks and videos on this, and I think he has a very sound hypothesis, is you could have space-time nomadic cultures out there who don't care about coming back home for dinner. They don't care. They travel at relativistic speeds and watch worlds evolve. Imagine how exciting that would be, is to watch thousands of years go by when it's only been hours or days or weeks or months for you. How incredibly exciting that would be.
Have you seen Time Bandits, Doctor?
I have.
It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I hope it wouldn't be for plundering. Yeah.
Well, speaking of movies, it sounds like a whole bunch of Richard Dreyfuses, just who are like, we don't care about family or coming back home. Yeah, I'm going on this spaceship for forever.
I have to emphasize, this is not theoretical or hypothetical, because the fact that GPS satellites are traveling at, I believe I'm going to get this wrong, but I'll get the ballpark, something like 17,000 miles per hour. You do need to account for relativistic effects. So Einstein's theory of relativity is not just a theory. If you believe that, throw out your GPS. Stop using GPS then, or your computer for that matter. So time dilation is real. We just can't do it on the scale of humans yet. But we do it all the time in particle physics. So in the Large Hadron Collider, particles that should die because they're radioactive decay, they'll live longer than they're supposed to because they're traveling near the speed of light. So time dilation is a real effect, and we proved it in the 1970s with the Heffel-Keating experiment, 2 atomic clocks, one on the Earth, one on the plane. So time dilation is real. So it's not a question of physics, it's a question of engineering. You don't need any new physics. You don't need extra dimensions, quantum, gravity, whatever, within the known laws of physics. If you had the fuel and the engineering ability to go near the speed of light, then you can cross the galaxy in a matter of months. Distances are meaningless. Time becomes meaningless. Alpha Centauri could be a few hours away. You don't need to travel faster than light. You don't need warp drive. You just need to go close to the speed of light. The closer you get to the speed of light, the better the time dilation effect. If you can travel close enough to the speed of light, you could cross the entire observable universe from Earth in one human lifetime. If you just add enough nines, 99.99999% of the speed of light. So it's a question of engineering. It's not a question of physics. You don't even need to invent new physics to make that possible. You just need to be a clever engineer.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So my question to you is, and so there are two different questions here. One is there life in the universe, or is there life in the galaxy? And I think, statistically speaking, the answer is there has to be.
It has to be.
Right. Now that's a different question. And we talked about traversing large amounts of space and how possible that is. And it's just an engineering feat. It's not a stretch of our current understanding of physics. It's not. So that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean that the UFOs that we're seeing here on Earth that we believe are UFOs are necessarily extraterrestrial by origin. We don't know that. So my original question was, do you think that some of these could be natural phenomena that we are just, from the flatland perspective, that we don't know how to interpret yet?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I cannot sit here and tell you, oh yeah, we have definitive evidence that some fraction of UFOs are alien spacecraft. It could be a natural phenomenon we haven't explained yet. It does not have to be an intelligence that builds craft.
Now, that being said, what do you think?
That's a phenomenon. Yeah.
Now, that being said, what do you think?
Well, what I think doesn't matter because it's what the facts are. Right? I could think that gravity doesn't exist, jump off a building, and it would kill me. So what I think or believe is irrelevant. What matters are what will the facts say if we can finally be allowed to, because, the stigma, obviously, in the field of ufology, just gather the facts and get to the bottom of things.
Right.
And stop pretending it's not there. Because there's clearly something happened.
Right.
There's clearly something real. Is it alien spacecraft? Is it a natural phenomenon? We don't know. We don't know. Given the amount of exoplanets, I'll be honest with you that I do favor the extraterrestrial hypothesis because of the vast number of planets out there. Right. But I don't want to be portrayed as favoring one hypothesis at the detriment of others, because that's bad. Because it's important to be open-minded, but as the joke always goes, not so open-minded your brain falls out.
Right.
We can't be fully agnostic because that's not how science works. You have to approach science with a hypothesis, be hypothesis-driven. So it's a valid hypothesis to say, do we have alien spacecraft? It's another valid hypothesis to say, do we have some electromagnetic plasma thing that makes orbs? That's a valid hypothesis. And we can come up with tests to test that hypothesis. So that's
we need more of you around here, because that's the biggest challenge right now when it comes to people's beliefs and understandings of whether or not to be agnostic or a believer or a non-believer. It's really not about that. It's not about what you believe or what you want to believe or some sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. It's about how do we test hypotheses, right? Exactly. That's where we should be heading.
Yes, because again, the nature does not care about your opinion or mine.
Right. Or your feelings.
I could be of the opinion that cancer doesn't exist and is a conspiracy. And then if I'm diagnosed with cancer, be like, oh, there's no such thing as conspiracy. I'm sorry, but it'll still kill me just as effectively as if I didn't believe that. So yeah, I try to stay away from words like think, feel, believe. Better verb is know. What do we actually know? What can we actually establish as a fact rather than just as our opinion? Because it is fun to have opinions, of course, and speculate, but what do the facts say? What does nature actually tell us is the truth?
What is your suggestion for people who do have belief systems that they're attached to, that they strongly hold on to? How do you begin to even broach the conversation of, hey, maybe you should let that go, because it's not a healthy way to think about things?
Well, that's a really, really deep question. There's nothing wrong with belief systems. I'm not like Neil deGrasse Tyson or Dawkins. In fact, I'm a very spiritual myself. I think I believe there is a God out there, and most scientists don't. They're atheists or agnostic. There's nothing wrong with having a belief system, but don't let your belief system interfere with studying the universe. So a great example of that, and if I'm not mistaken, I don't think I'm mistaken, I don't want to say something wrong, but I believe this is why Avi named his project the Galileo Project, because he was making an analogy, if I understand correctly, with the bishops who refused to look through Galileo's telescope. Look, right. Jupiter has moons. Oh, no, I'm not going to look. And you have that same thing now, except now it's scientists being dogmatic instead of just religious folk. Right. Now scientists are like, hey, look, I have this evidence. Look, that UFO could be an alien spacecraft. Oh, no, I'm not listening. La, 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 la. And that's not how science should be. The same thing happened with meteors. Do you guys realize that people used to write that people who believed in meteors were idiots? Did you guys know that? You know that Thomas Jefferson wrote, for example, people think rocks can fall from the sky. Oh, people are so stupid. And for centuries, scientists are like, oh, rocks from the sky? That doesn't fit in any of our models. That doesn't work. Turns out all those people for thousands of years who were saying rocks fall from the sky, guess what? They were all right. And the same thing might happen with UFOs. And where is that going to leave all the scientists who poo-pooed it for decades? Where is it going to leave them? Oh, crap, maybe I should have not been like those bishops in Galileo's telescope. Maybe I should have looked at the evidence and not just poo-pooed it all as nonsense. And so you have, if there's evidence, you need to look at it, not dismiss it out of hand as nonsense.
Wait, real quick. We had a couple of questions from your colleagues here. The first
I know Jeremy's in there, and Kevin.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy. Kevin Kennedy said, "May the force be with you, all four of them." Yeah. And then he also says, "Ask Matthew, what is the range of Mountain Dew?"
Range is a running joke on UAPX, actually.
Well, I'm assuming this is what Gary. Yeah. Ask Matt about the range on dark matter.
I think this warrants some explanation because it's a bit of an inside joke. So, but it's an educational moment. So there's this inside joke about range on UAPX. What is the range of a telescope or range of different sensors? Now, it's not a good question. The reason is because, well, infinite. So I can take my telescope now and look at something that's billions of light years away, right? Does that mean the range of my telescope is billions of light years? No. Because if there is a light bulb billions of light years away, or an LED, it's not producing enough light. And so when we talk about the capabilities of our sensors, and this ties in, Michael, with your earlier thing about senses and light, and there's Jeremy again. I love Jeremy. He's a great guy. The range of
his joke is limitless.
So it's all about how many particles are being produced per unit surface area as you go away from that object. So the brighter something is, you can see it from farther away. So yeah, there's this inside joke about range on UAPX. What's the range on that? Yeah.
Love it. Want to say real quick also to my mom. She sent me a $20 super sticker. She's the best.
Aw.
Thanks, Mom.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, it's always she's so sweet. Sorry, Jake, you had a question. Go for it.
Yeah, not a question, just for the listeners, real quick
Yeah.
about exoplanets. I'm sure you're familiar with this professor, but Professor Sarah Seeger over at MIT, her life's work is to find life on an exoplanet, and she has identified 42 planets right now that are in the habitable zone so far. And there's actually a very beautiful poetic story about why she's trying to find life, because her husband tragically passed away. And so she's a really great person to follow and to learn from. If you guys are interested out there listening, she has a website, sarahseeger.com. Check it out sometime.
Yeah, no, I've heard her name. I think I'm familiar with her work, and it's incredibly important work.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Because we need, I think, like I said, the odds are in our favor, to paraphrase Hunger Games. But the odds are really in our favor that there is life out there.
Can I ask you a personal question, Professor?
Okay.
You mentioned earlier that you do believe in God, and you mentioned most scientists are atheists, and many are agnostic. And I'd love to get your kind of perspective on this, because I think that, I consider myself somebody who believes in a higher power, but I also kind of consider myself agnostic because I can't quantify that power. How do you manage that as a self-described believer?
I can't quantify the wave function of an electron in my body right now, right in an atom right here either, yet it still exists.
Right.
So just because I can't quantify something doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right, but an agnostic can believe something exists or believe the potential for it to exist without saying they know what it is.
Yes.
So I'm just kind of curious, like, how you, as a scientist, how you balance that.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I don't see a need for balance even, or a conflict, because the way I look at it is, so God created the universe for certain laws and rules that then sort of take over in a sense where he doesn't really have to interfere. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, I'm not a deist, don't get me wrong, but I think that there's a framework that basically, to put it succinctly, I don't believe in a God of the gaps. And so there's nothing to balance. It's not like, oh, I believe we need God because there's this one missing part of science. Now, crap, well, that's solved now, so now we don't need God. So I don't believe in a God of the gaps, because that's really weak. Because then once you solve that question, then you don't need God anymore. So the way I look at it, there's nothing we could discover that would disprove the possibility of God for me. In which case, then, God is not a scientific hypothesis. This is not disprovable, and I admit that. I think it's I see where people are coming from, and they're well-intentioned to try to use science to prove God, but I think they might be misguided, because you're never going to prove or disprove God, because it's not going to happen, because you can always wiggle out, right? Obviously. And that's why I'm saying is that I don't ascribe to a God of the gaps, because then if I did, then, like you said, then I have to balance it.
Right.
But I have nothing to balance, because there's nothing that could be discovered that would disprove the possibility for me.
Interesting. Okay, because I actually consider myself somebody who does believe that there is a greater intelligence and force creating and within and experiencing everything. I just don't know what that is or means. Like, to an extent, right? Like, I understand how it can affect my experience of life. I understand how it moves me and my experience. But to me, I can't quantify that. So I can't call myself a believer. So I tend to quantify myself as an agnostic. And that doesn't mean, I think a lot of people get that confused, because they think that means that you don't believe that there's something greater, a greater intelligence or force holding the universe together that can't be quantified. I just find
that's funny, because I also consider myself an agnostic, and for me, the definition of that is you're open to any one of these things being right. Like, you don't have the answer as to which one is the right one to pray to or the right one to worship, but that this idea of religion as a whole, this idea of God or greater intelligence, something's there. I'm agnostic as to what it is, but I'm not agnostic to the idea that it's there.
Right.
So
I think you could do both, right?
Yeah.
in my own, so my own journey, faith journey, is that of a Roman Catholic, and I was raised Catholic.
So was I.
And the way I look at it as a scientist, you're asking how do I balance? The way I look at it is like, well, if I'm wrong, who cares? The way I look at it is, gee, if everyone loved their neighbor and prayed for their enemies, oh no, the world would be a horrible place. I don't think so. I think it would be just fine. And many of our founding fathers said the same thing, who were agnostic or deists. Well, we're like, well, it's great. Most Americans are some form of Christian, because if it's wrong, oh no, we loved our neighbors, and they're like, oh, what a horrible way to live is loving your neighbor. You know what I mean? So
that's the Crusades were not loving your neighbor.
Right. Yeah. I was gonna say the flip side of that is kind of
the Boston pedophilia cases that happened 30 miles from here were not loving your children.
Yeah.
So all right, so we're gonna go there. Okay.
This shit just got real.
Right. Yeah, this got
and also
real.
Pascal's wager also assumes that God is an idiot.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to address this. Okay. I'm going to start with an analogy that will seem completely unrelated. Okay. All right. So if an alcoholic came up to you and said, drinking is bad, does that make their statement false?
No.
If an alcoholic came up to you and says drinking is bad, does that make their statement false? No.
So to answer your thing about priests and pedophilia, which is a real problem and was hidden, just because someone does something evil or bad doesn't mean the words that come out of their mouth are untrue. So just because someone within a particular religion does something evil or wrong doesn't mean the tenets of that belief system are false. I've just disproven that to you. So if someone who's Jewish or Muslim or something does a horrible thing, that doesn't mean that their faith is wrong. They might have the truth, but that particular person did the wrong thing. Even if, I know what you're going to counter with, even if the problem is endemic or systemic, that doesn't disprove the truth of those who say something, like in my alcoholic analogy. The alcoholic may be a hypocrite, but the facts, the factual veracity of the words that came out of their mouth didn't change by the fact they're an alcoholic. So a pedophile priest who says Jesus loves you doesn't make that statement false because that bad person said it. So there you go. So that's what I don't want to go down that rabbit hole though.
I'm sorry. I feel like I started this. My bad.
No. I mean, sometimes we get there. It's okay.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is I mean, I've not met, including myself, I've not met somebody who's not a hypocrite.
Right.
I've yet to meet somebody who has not done one thing and said another.
Yeah,
exactly.
No,
and every single religion, I don't care if it's organized, disorganized, whatever the heck adjective you want to use, has had massive problems. So we have, either you have pedophilia, or you have terrorism, or you have crusades earlier. But guess what? The same thing has happened with scientists. Do you know how many scientists
Whoa! I cannot believe. I'm sorry. I cannot believe we are comparing religion to science. I was going to let this go, but the argument that we're saying this on is because those people are hypocritical. We cannot blame the religion. We can blame the people. And now we're comparing that because the scientists are bad. We can't blame science. We can blame the people. But the very foundation of Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, it's all false. And so the scripture itself is false. So it's not just the people that I'm blaming. That's Pastor Frank Turek said this. You can hate the Christians, but don't hate Christianity. But you can hate Christianity because it's false. And as a scientist, there's so many things in the Bible that are wrong scientifically that I can also make up that there's a unicorn outside. I can't prove that there isn't. So there could be. So that's now me being an agnostic towards being a unicorn. But for someone to have died on the cross with no evidence and then said he got raised from the dead 3 days later, There's no evidence of anyone ever getting resurrected ever. So why would I believe that? And for them to say Lot gave his daughters to have sex with the people who are gay in that town, how am I going to believe that as being so? I'm not blaming the Christians. I'm going to blame the Christians, but not the Christianity. The religion itself is false, and I can't let that conversation go on being compared to science. I'm sorry.
But the earlier example came from Avi Loeb himself, with the scientists who don't look at the UFO evidence are just like the bishops in the telescope. That's a perfect analogy. I don't understand. So scientists who refuse to look at evidence that disprove their favorite theory, are they any better than your religious examples? I don't understand. They're just as bad.
Right. So we can look at the examples of the resurrection and say, well, what can bring someone back to consciousness? Roger Penrose talks about microtubules, and that's what he thinks is creating consciousness. So then let's, as scientists, look and say, can we possibly resurrect someone? Until then, we go, we can't, but we're definitely having to look at it. Let's look at religion as scientists. Is it possible for Noah to do that stuff? Is it possible for God to create the earth in 7 days? Well, then they say, well, actually, that's an analogy. It's not quite, Adam and Eve. That's all an analogy from Genesis onward. Okay, but let's approach religion as scientists and not as believers. Like, let's approach it as theologians and not as believers.
Do you have a choice though, as a scientist, to have a personal life and a professional life? Can you approach? I mean, I guess my question is towards Jake. My question to Jake is, can you have a personal belief system and a scientific approach, and an approach to the scientific method to experiment while still having a personal belief or spiritual perspective? Can you live it? And this is exactly why I asked you that question earlier, because I think it's important for us to discuss when it comes to science versus personal beliefs. And oftentimes this UFO topic converge on religious. People move with religious fervor when they talk about UFOs, which is why I think it's so important for us to take a step back and look at it from a broader perspective.
Richard Dawkins talks about his contemporary Professor Kurt Wise, who I believe is Harvard educated, and he's a believer, a very smart man, and he's a creationist, and he is a purebred scientist, just like you, Professor, just like Sarah Seeger, just like all these highly educated people. Yet he believes in the Bible. And then one night, Kurt Wise cut all of the things that were not scientifically true out of the Bible. And what he was left with was something he could not even lift without it disintegrating. And at that moment, he said, despite this, I still have to believe what's in the Bible over what I know is scientifically inaccurate in the Bible. And that's when Richard Dawkins said, this is when that clouds his judgment as a scientist. So I'm giving that example, which is not me, but I'm giving just the example that he gave there.
Here's a counter example that debunks the entire, there's this and that scientific inaccuracy in the Bible. Is a Picasso painting an accurate photograph of that person? No. As a Catholic, I'm not a fundamentalist, Christian who believes every single thing in the Bible, because truth is not just true and false. There's also something called art and myth. So I'll give you an example that will probably blow your mind, or you'll probably have a counter argument. So St. Augustine, centuries ago, I can prove this to you. I'll show you where he wrote this. St. Augustine, writing millennia ago, St. Augustine, one of the heroes of the Catholic Church, wrote, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, he didn't write this exactly. He wrote, people who take Genesis literally are kind of stupid. He literally wrote that millennia ago. The whole idea of taking the Bible literally, guess what? That started in America a couple centuries ago. That does not have a history going back thousands of years. Thousands of years, it was understood, that's allegory, that's myth, that didn't really happen. Like, I'm Catholic, and the Pope even said this is okay, by the way. Pope John Paul II said there was no literal Adam and Eve. Humans evolved, and I don't have a problem with that. And even the Pope said in the 1990s that was okay, because it's not meant to be taken literally. It's
so
not meant
how much of the Bible is not meant to be taken literally, though?
The 1800s. It's a bullshit American invention of the 1800s. It does not have a centuries-old tradition. And before you bring up Galileo, that was political in order to look conservative in front of the Protestants during the Protestant Reformation, and the Pope apologized about it.
So how much of the Bible is supposed to be seen as Picasso's art and how much is literal? Or is it a matter of what's convenient to us? When it says, love thy neighbor as you love yourselves, can't I just view that as art? And can I just, fuck my neighbor? Can I just screw my neighbor's wife?
No, and in fact, that's why I take issue with something you said earlier. You hate Christianity, you said, not just Christians. I'm sorry, but that's part of why our world is so messed up today, because we have too much hate.
That's not what I said earlier. Excuse me. He said that Pastor Turek said that you can hate Christians, but not the Christianity. I didn't say that I hate Christianity.
Oh, okay. I just misunderstood you. Yeah.
That's right.
So what we need in this world is more understanding. I have one belief system, but I personally will not hate or disrespect someone who has a different belief system than myself. The only exception is when that belief system conflicts with something I know to be scientifically true. And hopefully that makes you happy, Jake. So here's a controversial example I'll give. Okay, it's going to piss off a lot of listeners, but I have to say it. Here's a good example. If your religion says you can't take the COVID vaccine, screw you. I'm sorry, I want to say it on YouTube. It's bullshit, because you're killing people by doing that. So if your belief system does come into contradiction with scientific facts, then I have a problem. But otherwise, I do my very best to try to be understanding and believe and respect people with different belief systems. Someone could tell me, for example, their experiencer, and they've seen aliens and stuff. Maybe they're right. It's worth me studying and verifying whether that's true. I'm not going to dismiss it out of hand like they're crazy, because what if one of them is right? It's an important discovery than waiting to happen. So I would allow for the possibility. But then if it's disproven, then you have to discard your incorrect belief that's been disproven by religion.
In the Quran, it says homosexuality is haram, it means a sin, and it says that the penalty for apostasy is death, and that the goal is to create a caliphate all over the world. That could be viewed as art or literal. In Christianity, it says that the man is the head of the household. Despite if a woman is smarter than the man and knows that I got to help this family out more than the man has to say, no, but I'm actually the head of the household. I'm confused on when we don't rely on our own critical faculties that we're born with versus what we're now going to be interpreting loosely as art, and what's Picasso and what's literal. And I could take Genesis as an allegory, but I should be respecting my elders, as Jesus said with the Beatitudes. It's so confusing. Why don't we just rely on the scientific method and say, rely on our own critical faculties, have peer review of what we think is probably best for humanity, find out what works as a pattern, and keep promoting those things?
Because science is lacking one thing, which is it doesn't give you a moral compass or ethics. That's the one thing science can never provide. So scientifically, one could make great scientific arguments, and this was done in the middle of the last century, of like, then we need to euthanize anyone who's different than us, scientifically. So for every example of religion saying an entire group is bad, like homosexuals, for example, I can give an example of either communists or the Nazis or some atheist or scientific organization doing the exact same thing to a different group. So it's that humans, the problem is that humans, regardless of what endeavor we do, whether it's science or religion or whatever endeavor humans undertake, we manage to put our own hatreds and biases into it. Science has its own penalty for apostasy, okay? It's not death. What it is you have a crazy new idea, you won't get it published anywhere. Okay, so the religious dogmatism has been slowly replaced or augmented, because obviously religious dogmatism still exists around the world, has been augmented by scientific dogmatism, where if you don't think the same way, then you are ostracized. At one point, we thought Einstein's theory of relativity was nonsense, stupid idea. We thought germs didn't exist. We thought the speed of light was infinite. And we used our critical faculties to prove that. We use our critical faculties to prove that germs can't possibly exist and that the speed of light can't possibly be finite. But we were wrong. And so the point is that it was a self-referential correcting process. But I think we've gone down a really, really deep rabbit hole. Really deep rabbit hole, because I can't stand here and defend Christian doctrine and resurrection to you, because that's not even the topic we're supposed to be on. And we can go into a 30-hour rabbit hole where I'll never convince you and you'll never convince me. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, look, religion is a touchy subject. Obviously, we don't like to talk about it at the dinner table, right? Along with politics and a couple other things. But I thought this was an interesting, respectful conversation, and I agree with you on some points, Jake. Like, but I also like the way it sounded like you framed it is almost like, we've got scientists there with the Quran and the Bible on their desk with them, and they're referencing it when they're doing their scientific work, and I don't think we're at that stage anymore where the Catholic Church is inside the lab trying to dictate what it will come out of the lab, if that makes sense.
Well, that was the case centuries ago, and
that was the case centuries ago. And I mean, and this is something that is going to take, I think, even more centuries to sort of work out of our system. It's look, I think it's a growing pain in the process, and whether we like it or not, religion is part of our culture, is part of the human society. We're not going to just snap our fingers and all of a sudden religion's gone. I think there's a lot of flaws. I think there's a lot of issues that have been caused from a world diplomatic standpoint because of religion. People have been killed in the name of it. But, it's tough, man. This is what our societal bounds are. And conversations like this, I think, are what start to change those things.
Yeah, so here's a great example from South Park, actually. Great show that illustrates my point. Is that you don't need religion as excuse to hate and kill each other. You can do it in different ways. So I think Cartman wanted to get a Wii, but it wasn't out for a few weeks. So he got cryogenically frozen. Any of you guys watch out, seen this episode? But they forgot to revive him, right? And he wakes up in the future. Religion's been eradicated. Hooray, right? Except like the world, what was it? I think the World Atheist Confederation was at war with the World Atheist Congress or something. And instead of God damn you, they'd say, science damn you, and like still hate it and kill each other. And I was like, I saw that episode and it changed my life. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Human beings will always find a way to hate.
We'll always find a way to hate and kill each other. You could eradicate religion, we'll find a new way to hate and kill each other because we're human beings. We'll always find a way to hate and kill each other.
All right, so we've only got a few minutes left, and I want to get to a couple of questions. And Jane is in our private chat right now, just like saying a couple things. And I just want to echo her thoughts here. She's a co-host of the show. She says the Bible's not just one book or one thing. It's extremely complex with many books written at different times by different authors. The Old Testament and the New Testament can't really be discussed together. It's silly to oversimplify it or look at the Bible unscientifically. At Baylor, a Christian college she went to for 2 years, and she was atheistic at the time. She took a Bible course. It's known for making religious people atheistic because you really can't break it down like you would any old text, and they wouldn't identify authors by wording and voices of the author. Anyways, I remember seeing Richard Dawkins around the same time. I was a fan of him back in the day. I think he has done a lot of progress for human thought. And then we had a couple of questions from our other co-host, Ratherby Squidding, who couldn't be here today. So this is a two-part question, and if we can answer, I know I don't mean to do this, but if we can condense these answers as quickly as we can, that'd be great, because there's a couple of questions I want to get in here before we get out of here.
Well, I can stay a little late because look, we barely talked about UAP.
No, we barely touched UAP, which is.
Well, you're coming back. I think Professor, are you willing to come back a few times? Because I'd like to have you over at the Singularity Lab as well, if you don't mind coming back.
Sure.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, I mean, this conversation can't be fit into 2 hours, but I appreciate your time. So rather ask, how has dark matter research sustained itself over the years with no results, and do you think that the UAP search for UAP will be similar?
That's a great question. So the reason why the search for dark matter continues, a couple different reasons. One is we have not eliminated all of the what could be termed by theoretical physicists natural possibilities. So for example, we recently discovered the Higgs boson, and we have not quite ruled out Higgs-mediated dark matter coupling. So there are still viable possibilities. So the search can't just go on forever. And the other reason is because of the mountains of indirect evidence. I quoted earlier, gravitational lensing, cosmic microwave background. The thing is, there's so much evidence from astronomy that something's there, that it motivates to keep trying. And like I said earlier, like it's, my dark matter experiment is like the teeny tiny fraction of the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq. One missile we launch against Syria would build like 20 dark matter experiments that I work on. So it's a teeny tiny investment of money for something that has mountains of indirect evidence in favor of it. And then the last part of my answer is we do kind of have a natural stopping point, although physicists argue back and forth about it, is there's sort of this thing called the neutrino fog, where you build your dark matter experiment so big that you get overwhelmed with neutrinos, primarily from the sun. So now that even if dark matter is there, we're going to have a hard time finding it. So we can't just keep building more and more dark matter detectors. That's actually one of the things I love about my field, is there is a natural stopping point. It's still probably 1 to 2, maybe 3 decades away, but there is kind of a natural stopping point, arguably, where we've either discovered dark matter finally, or we have potentially proven it's beyond humanity's reach, which would be sad. But yeah, that's why we keep going. There was a second question in there, though.
Well, do you think the search for UAP will be similar in how the length of it?
Yes, so that's a really great question, because it's kind of different. It's kind of apples and oranges. And the reason is because dark matter managed to get itself, baptized or whatever, a scientific dogma. Meanwhile, UAPs is like, oh, no, you can't look at that. No, that's crackpots only. And so it's even harder. Dark matter already has an uphill battle.
What do you think comes first, UAP? What do you think comes first, UAPs or dark matter?
That's a very tough question. I really don't know, because I think, we just finished building, like I said, my biggest dark matter experiment. We could be on the verge of that. But then again, we have, I work on UAPX. We have the Galileo project. We have, all the revelations we've had over the past few years with the Nimitz encounter and stuff like that. And so, wow, I would, if I had to guess, I would say my opinion is dark matter, not because it's my primary field of work, but because I fear that there's still so much antagonism and social stigma against being allowed to study UFOs, that I feel like that's going to slow things down unnecessarily. But obviously that could completely change with like government disclosure at some high level or something like that. But my gut feeling is that we still have a long road ahead of us on reducing the social stigma and the taboo that's associated with being allowed to apply critical thinking, rationality, and the scientific method to the study of UFOs.
Okay, and then the last question rather had, can you compare the as of yet undisclosed discoveries by UAPX to milestone search for dark matters?
That's a sneaky question.
It is, yeah. You're lucky he's not here.
Yeah,
he would have been even sneakier. We're saving some of these last questions to get you in trouble.
They're gonna get me in trouble. We did have the press release. I'm sure you guys digested every word.
We did, yeah.
Look, so I can't go beyond what's there because I get in trouble because we have the NDA and stuff. So, but you have to be patient a few more months. But I will say, we found, as the press release says, we found some interesting things. Now, how can I compare that to dark matter? I don't know how, because we haven't seen anything yet.
I was gonna say maybe we could come up with another scientific theory or hypothesis that we could compare it to. I can't think of what that would be though.
I'll just say, look, wait a few months. We did find some things that should hopefully change the conversation. Because I hope we can finally move things forward, because now it's multiple groups, right? It's not just UAPX. We have Avi Loeb in the Galileo project taking off. We have like Sky Hub or Sky 360. There's like a bajillion different groups now. We have SCU, which are most of them are Science Coalition for Ufology. We have so many groups now, and that's a good thing. That's a really, really good thing, because we have multiple people interested in this, and we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. We have different people, just like I have in my dark matter field, different ideas working together. But yeah, I'm hoping that we will change the conversation finally, where people will finally be like, huh, I guess there's no way it's an optical illusion or it's in your head. That is not a viable cop-out anymore. I mean, that should already after the Nimitz and the fleet. Yeah.
So then the last question, this was a question for me, the last question I had, and we got a couple minutes left here. But last year there was a presentation that was made at the AAIA. And there was, I thought we were working on a paper, and there's also a video to go along with that paper being written. Is there any more traction on that? And are we going to get the results of that presentation?
From the AIAA presentation?
Yeah.
So yeah, no, there's plenty that still needs to be done. So here's the thing that, so the thing about the scientific process is it's incredibly slow because, and even normally, but when it comes to something like UFOs, because it's so controversial, we have to double check, triple check, and quadruple check. And so we have multiple levels of that. First, we need to be self-critical and self-skeptical and be our own worst enemy and be like, well, is that something interesting? Or is that a picture or photograph of a mundane object or phenomenon? And then we have the external blind peer review process where unknown scientists critique papers that we submit to journals to try to get them published, get critiqued by unknown science, by unknown, it's a blind review by external, by some scientists requested by an editor of the journal. It's a very long process. We give talks, obviously presentations, to want to generate excitement in what we do, but we also don't want to conclude something, make it conclusive until we've literally looked under every rock to make sure we haven't made a mistake. And when it comes to something like UFOs, it's extra bad, right? Because you don't want to take a bird or a plane and be like, oh, look, it's evidence of an alien spacecraft, because then you look extremely bad, right? And that happens in science all the time. I'm not talking about just UFOs where things are discovered, but no, that was a mistake, right? And we have to take it back. And that's how science works. Like I said earlier, there's uncertainty. It's a referential process. Science, in that sense, Jake will be happy. Okay, very different in this sense than religion. Because if you learn something new in science, the whole point is throw out what you already said because it was wrong. That is very important to keep in mind. And so science is this dialectic process where it's not like what we learned in school. Unfortunately, a lot of science education, I don't like this, especially young age, you're taught, here's almighty science, and that's the end of it. But the thing is, science is a process of uncertainty, where you have to constantly be ready to be wrong. And if you're not ready to be wrong, if you're arrogant enough to think you're always right, that's a problem, because you're not always right. None of us are always right. And so we think we do have some exciting discoveries, though, like I said, but we need to take a few months. You have to be patient a few more months, and we should have stuff from UAPX where we can write scientific publications, which I know we conducted a poll, I know, on UAPX. I believe Jeremy McGowan did this informed poll. Like, most people don't care about that, especially UFO community. Oh, give us a high resolution picture. But if we're going to move things forward, what we actually need are scientific papers that are read by people who are debunkers. But then they read it and they're like, holy shit, there's something to this. Yeah. And then we convince people who are like, no way, there's no such, UFOs are stupid and unimportant. If we can convince people like that in the scientific community, then we can get some traction. And the way we're going to do it is not with photos and videos that can be photoshopped and CGI'd, but with different sensors beyond. This ties in what we were saying earlier, Michael, that go beyond just look what I can do with my camera, but can corroborate from different types of sensors that we have seen something anomalous. We've got to do that before we can claim that we've definitively found something new and weird.
From your lips to Doc's to God's ear to whatever's ear. I appreciate you being here, my friend. I cannot wait to have you back. I mean, we didn't even, like you said, we barely even scratched the UAP topic. So I hope to have you back as soon as possible. We've got.
I'd like to have you on the Singularity Lab for other reasons, but we'll
Sure.
have a conversation.
Yeah. Let's set that up. But we got less than a minute to get out of here. So I want to say thank you to everybody out there who watched the show today. We've got links for Professor Szydagis in the links below. We've got links for Jake Matthews. We got links for Michael, for myself. Stick around for about 15 minutes. We're going to be letting you guys know about something that if you want to help out with an Afghan refugee situation, stick around for about 15 minutes after we leave the KGRA DB stream, and we're going to talk about that for a hot second if that's something you're interested in helping in. But until next time, until next week, you guys, thank you so much for coming aboard, getting weird with us here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UAP and UFO. Until next time, you guys, stay safe out there. We love you very much. Peace.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, Professor.
Whoop, whoop. Are we just chilling now?
I think we're just chilling right now.
I'm
pretty sure we're off the KGRA DB.
Are we off the KGR air?
I didn't know. Only because Bill's gone. Yep, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I actually have a soccer game that I'm taking my daughter to, and I didn't realize we were doing an after party thing.
No, it's all good. I forgot to even mention it to you. It's something that Jake asked if we could do, and I was like, absolutely, yeah, man. It's a good cause, so we'll do that.
What's the cause? Afghan refugee situation. What's like specifically? What should we be looking at? I got 5 minutes. Hit me.
How do I send this email to everybody, Luis? The one that I sent you.
Well, what I could do is I could put it on screen.
Okay.
And then we'll let so if you want to start talking about it, I can pull that up right now.
There's a family of 4 children and their father who are set for execution ASAP, and I'm trying to find a way to get them out of Afghanistan. He served as a police officer there. He served with the U.S. He's in hiding. His baby was shot at 2 hours old in the maternity ward, and the mother was killed after giving birth, 2 hours after giving birth.
Jesus Christ.
It's on the BBC and everything. I've been doing interviews on my channel with one of the refugees who escaped to a country. A lot of this information is sensitive because he's in hiding right now live with the 4 kids, but she represents, because she got really popular for having been shot at 2 hours old, and now she could walk, even though now her feet is going gangrene because her doctor had to leave. But it's just a race against the clock. And I've called 3 congressmen, the State Department, Afghan evac. I've been talking to everybody, and honestly, what they're doing is just kicking the can down the road, waiting for everyone to be dead who's supposed to be dead. And it's out of the news cycle. Nobody cares anymore. So it's one of those things where I know, like, what does Stalin say? If like one person dies, it's a tragedy. If it's a million, it's a statistic. Like, this is one family that we could look at now. And it's not everybody, but there are 4 kids with a gun to their head hiding every day. And it's 7 degrees in Kabul. And I just got to figure out some way to get them out of there. We've even looked into smuggling, human smuggling, things like that, which Congressman DeFazio's office did not condone. She was like, yeah, I don't not condone that if you want to do that. So it's like kind of getting that desperate, obviously. And the father has sent me photos of his colleagues who have all been disappeared, which means that they've been shot in the head. And the babies and his kids and him are next. So I just know it's a matter of days before I get the call from our girl who did manage to escape. But these are some emails. This is like the best information I can give you. It's even this isn't really going to do anything, but I'm not really like online or like mainstream or anything. So like, I don't know how things go popular online.
Can we? Okay. All right. So
if you can make it popular online, like I can send you all the information, and it's just a race against the clock.
So you said there's emailing Gladys Rodriguez, MAO2 at emanager.house.gov. Who is that? What should we be saying to that person?
That is Peter. That is Congressman Jim McGovern from Massachusetts. That's his assistant. She's the one who's been most responsive, even though what she's basically saying is there's nothing we can do. The State Department is not talking to Congress, yet they tell you to contact your congressman. So there's 2 chasms that they kind of built in there so that no information actually gets anywhere. So I'm not really sure what to do. We can just keep hounding her, and hopefully it'll go somewhere. I sent you a PDF, Luis, with my letter, and it has like a photo of the girl as well, if that helps at all. But This is the most we can
I
do.
think the thing that would help the most is, first of all, there's a hashtag hashtag Save Baby Amina. So if you guys want to hashtag it, that'd be great. Share this. I just put the link for the email for the assistant to Jim McGovern. So if you got some time, send them an email. This is essentially a big phone home, just for different kind of cause. It's a different big phone home, you know. So all we're doing is replacing UFOs with say Baby Amina, essentially. So if you can call, if you can email, that would be great. This is again, it's
also, if we have a picture,
no idea if we'll be successful, but it's at least worth a try.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we have a picture as well, if you could put that on your Twitter and then the links to all of the emails, that would be excellent, because then we can retweet that and then with the hashtag and hopefully get it further out there.
I'm worried. This is the baby. I'm just worried with the picture that they're going to find her more easily. But that's her. Yeah. But it's I'm kind of caught in between a rock and a hard place, like deciding whether to make their story more popular or not.
Right.
It's kind of tricky, but
well, there's a great interview that you did on your channel, which, by the way, I'd love for you to tell everybody about your channel, what you're doing, because it's very unique.
Yeah, I started a channel called Dear Daughter. They are video essays, lessons, interviews to my future daughter, who's not here yet because I have to have sex with a human. But whenever she gets here, it could be 9 months from now or 9 years from now, who cares? It's just kind of like a library of stuff on how the Earth is and the cosmos and news and history right now before she's even here. So one of the things we did, one of the videos, that's her leg now during getting gangrene because the doctor had to escape. But one of the things we did is we did an interview with an Afghan refugee who helped her, and she now made it safely out to Europe, but she kind of gives all the details. So you'll hear about like the Kabul bombing that happened as all those people tried to escape, and just like everything. It's like an hour long, but it's super fast, and it's a really insane story.
I'll put the link of that in the description. If you guys want to go listen to that interview, please do, so you could get a really good idea of what this story is all about and what's happening. And then, if that compels you to help, please do. As soon as the show's over, I'm going to be emailing or tweeting out the email address. And is there anything else you want me to put out with this email address, other than the hashtag and what the cause is, what we're trying to do?
I think that's everything.
Yeah. Okay, great. Again, guys, I know this is sort of derailed, not something we normally talk about, but this community has a really great, we've already established the skeleton of how to activate ourselves with our local state representatives. So just take that exact same formula and apply it to this. If this is important, of course, get some more details, so that way you can when you make your requests, it's sincere and it's coming from an honest place, and maybe it'll be taken more seriously. What were you gonna say, Jake?
Just that PDF. Like, is that just easier for them to just keep mailing that out? Like, is there a way to put a PDF on this so that they don't have to keep writing?
For some reason, I don't know why I don't have a PDF. Maybe I'm just missing it, and because sometimes I'm an idiot with Gmail. But if you want to resend it to me, I can also put that as like a picture, along with whatever we tweet out, so people can check it out and get some more details. But I appreciate everyone. We kind of ran out of time at the end of the show, so I didn't get to thank everyone. I want to say thank you to everyone who sent us some super chats. I know I didn't get to one or two of them. Juan Perez, thank you so much. Jake is awesome, keeping it real. He says for $5. By the way, you got a fan there.
Thank you.
Sorry, Josh B, if I didn't get to this question, but next time he comes, I promise you will get there. Just ask us again. Can the professor discuss what findings he's most excited about as part of the UAPX work? I'm so sorry we didn't get to that question, because that's a great question. Jeremy McGowan, thanks for the $5. Appreciate it. Kevin Knuth and everybody who was here. Josh B, Baby Goat. Thank you guys so much for all of the great questions. It was a really, really fun interview. Want to say thank you, Jake, for being here, man. You were a great fill-in. You almost pissed off our guest,
like our normal co-host.
Yeah, it's just like a normal co-host. So you fit like a glove.
Like a glove.
Yeah.
I felt bad. I was like, did I start this? I didn't mean to but it was a good. I thought it was a good conversation. I like talking about this stuff.
You know,
Dude, I didn't read all the comments till over. I was like, oh no, I was trying to stop this too. I was like, oh no, everybody wanted this to end, so did I.
Oh my god, so funny.
I'm sorry, everybody.
We took off our ties. Well, dude, yeah.
Oh, good.
I
well,
mean,
at least never mind. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
I was
what are
gonna
you gonna say?
No, I was gonna say a shitty comment from somebody in the right, but they don't even deserve a comment because it's so shitty. Anyway,
okay, awesome. Yeah, there was somebody who complained about, can we do not talk about religion? I think it was Artisan Tony. I love you to death, man, but nobody's telling you how to think here. Nobody is telling you how to think.
Conversation.
We're having a conversation, you know, and if we can help people get out of deep, dark rabbit holes like I used to exist in when it comes to the UAP UFO discussion, I'm gonna try and help that person get out of that deep dark hole that maybe is alienating themselves from their family or doing destructive things to their life that they're not even aware of because they're so deep in this hole. Like if it wasn't for Neil deGrasse Tyson, I would be absolutely gaga goo goo nuts, like in the deepest rabbit hole possible. But because Neil deGrasse Tyson exists, and I know he's a controversial figure in this community, but because of him, you know, I was able to dig myself out of a rabbit hole of conspiracy and false information. And I think that's a good thing. And if you don't want to do great, we're not forcing you. Like we're not we're not a government here. We're not like, we have no power at all. You know, all we could do is have the conversations and just try and be as respectful as possible. And I think we accomplished that today. Michael, do you have any thoughts before you get out of here for your soccer game?
I completely agree. I mean, again, I was the one who brought the conversation up because I wanted to understand, you know, how a scientist thinks and who is also a believer at the same time, because I do consider myself somewhere way in between.
Yeah.
But I'm always fascinated to learn how other people think. And, you know, for people who want to make this about the right and the left, you know, just don't come to my show because you can fuck off.
No,
that's all I got.
One of my heroes said on his, deathbed, he goes, "Never be afraid of stridency." That's what Christopher Hitchens said. He just means like never be afraid of speaking up, because that's what the conversation is about. Like I don't think anyone's insulted. We're having a conversation because the grave will hold plenty of time for silence. So now's the time to communicate.
Amen, brother.
Let's talk.
Absolutely love it, man. What a great way to end the show. Michael, get to that soccer game. I'll see you later. For everyone else out there, thank you so damn much for coming aboard, getting weird with us here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Thank you for any help that you can send Baby Amina's way. Look out for my Twitter. I'll be sending that PDF. If you guys want to help me retweet it, that would be absolutely amazing, and see if we can get the attention of that congressman. What was it, McGovern?
Yeah, McGovern. Yeah.
McGovern, Congressman McGovern, and see. Let's try. You know, I mean, we don't know. We don't know until we try. We don't know until we ask. So, you know,
Thank you, Luis.
And if we could help save a life, imagine how amazing that would be if this community did that.
Absolutely.
You know, so yeah. Again, look out for the Twitter. I'll be sending it out here within the hour. I got a lot of stuff to do. I got to upload the show to the podcast. I've got an after discussion on Discord. So I will be sending that tweet out tonight. So look out for it. Jake, if you send me that PDF again, that'd be great.
I just sent you in via text. So
awesome. Thank you, my man. I love you to death. Thank you for doing the show.
Too.
I can't wait to you guys. I mean, I'm so happy that my actor friends are now starting to come back to the show. Not only does it make the name of the show make more sense, the Unidentified Celebrity Review.
Yeah.
If you guys don't know, which you probably don't, because he's an unidentified celebrity, Jake has been on major television shows, films. We met at the CBS Diversity Showcase, and he's just a brilliant, beautiful, wonderful mind.
I'm very popular with white women over 65. All my shows are mainly CBS procedurals, and this old white lady be like, "Aren't you the colored boy from the?" I'm like, "Yeah, I am."
Well, at least you got a fan base, my friend. That's more than a lot of people can say. Yep. All right, man. I love you to death. You guys stay safe out there. We'll see you on Monday. We've got a great lineup of guests. I don't have it in front of me, but we've always got great guests on the show. So come back. We'll see you later. Love ya. Peace.
See you, brother. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, wait. How do I... I'm going to tell you right now, all of these wonderful people would not be here without Patreon supporters like you. If you enjoy credible news, reviews, and commentary on UFOs and UAPs 5 days a week, you want to support this show. What's your name? Marty. Marty, look how easy this is, Marty. Pick up your phone. Boom, you're a Patreon member. I mean, look, it's so easy. You just click the link, which is right here. Just for $1 a month, you can support this show. Just fill out the information and pledge what's comfortable for you. It could be $1, $5, $10, or who knows. Just support. Thank you to all of my my moderators out there, Tina Tomaszewski, all of my members, Aaron DeSario, everyone out there that helped with the chat. Thank you all. Love you. Peace.